Have you ever spent months just observing a seemingly mundane, everyday object?
Oh, like a watch pot never boiling kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. But imagine knowing that the second it crosses this, like, invisible biological finish line, it's gonna literally detonate.
Wait, detonate. As in explode.
Literally explode.
Yeah.
You spend a quarter of a year watching something that appears completely static. But underneath that shell, a high-stakes mechanical countdown is ticking away.
That framing really shifts the concept of waiting, doesn't it? It goes
Yeah.
from a passive chore into this active, almost suspenseful vigil.
Right.
You aren't just letting time pass, you are monitoring a highly pressurized system.
Which is precisely the tension captured in today's deep dive. We are looking at a deeply observant piece of source material published today, April 26, 2026.
Fresh off the press.
Fresh out of the garden, actually. It's a gardening journal entry from an author named Ang, and it's titled Notes on Gardening, Part 877.
Part 877. I mean, wow. A title like that implies a multi-year, maybe even multi-decade project of continuous botanical tracking.
Yeah, it indicates a staggering level of daily dedication.
It really establishes the author as someone who understands the micro shifts in a local ecosystem, you know?
Definitely. And for this deep dive, we're focusing on Ang's specific documentation of the cultivation, the life cycle, and the highly volatile seed harvest of the peacock flower.
Ah, scientifically classified as Caesalpinia pulcherrima.
That's the one. And my co-host here is going to help us break down exactly what's happening under the hood.
Yeah, my role today is to analyze the underlying biological mechanics and the timeline and documents. Because, behind the simple act of a gardener waiting for a seed, there's a complex biological engine aggressively reallocating resources.
It's working overtime.
Exactly. We'll examine the evolutionary strategy playing out during those months of waiting and the precise mechanical triggers the gardener has to intercept to secure a harvest.
Okay, let's unpack this. Ang's journal outlines a deliberate choice that forces this entire timeline.
Right, because they didn't have to wait, technically.
Exactly. The author already has an abundance of the yellow variety of the peacock flower.
Yeah.
Those seeds were foraged locally, planted, and have already successfully sprouted into small plants. It was easy.
Well, foraging represents a really low barrier entry to cultivation. I mean, you capitalize on nature's existing success.
You're just picking up what's already there.
Right. You take a seed that has already survived the gestation and dispersal phase in the wild. It's highly efficient from an energy standpoint for the gardener.
But the yellow variety isn't Ang's preference. The goal is the red variety, which apparently is notably elusive in this specific wild environment.
They can't just stumble upon it.
No. So instead of relying on serendipitous foraging, Ang intentionally purchases a mature red plant specifically to harvest its fresh seeds.
And that decision fundamentally alters the gardener's relationship with the plant and, well, with the passage of time itself.
Yeah. Ang abandons the immediate gratification of finding wild seeds for a grueling 8 to 12-week waiting period.
That's a long time to wait for a seed.
It really is. You are intentionally bypassing an easy botanical win for a much longer, riskier cultivation cycle.
The shift from opportunist to cultivator is profound.
It's like when you forage, you're a scavenger relying on luck. But when you buy the mature red plant to force a harvest, you become a manager of biological assets.
What's fascinating here is the sheer dedication required in horticulture and what it represents biologically.
Yeah.
Committing a quarter of a year to simply waiting for a plant to produce a seed forces you to confront the massive biological energy required for this process.
Because it's not just sitting there doing nothing.
Not at all. The plant is synthesizing nutrients, pulling water from the soil, utilizing solar energy, and redirecting all of that into microscopic cellular development.
So it's the difference between finding a lucky $20 bill on the sidewalk versus tying up your capital in a long-term savings account.
That's a great way to put it.
Like a 12-week timeline means the gardener is essentially underwriting a massive botanical construction project, trusting that the payoff at the end justifies the wait.
And during those 8 to 12 weeks, the plant is highly vulnerable.
To what, like bugs?
Pests, weather fluctuations, disease. The gardener isn't just passively waiting. They're standing guard over a process that demands a high degree of energetic investment.
From both the plant and the human.
Exactly. The financial analogy holds up really well because the plant itself operates on a strict energy economy. When Ang commits to this observation period, they are watching the plant aggressively manage its metabolic budget.
And the journal details exactly how that metabolic budget is spent. It breaks down a physical transformation that is far more dramatic than just watching something slowly grow.
It's a huge shift.
Right. Eng documents the early phase, starting with firm green buds that eventually swell and boost into the peacock flower's signature vibrant display.
And that bloom phase is the plant's peak expenditure of resources for external signaling.
The flashy part.
Yeah, the visual display of Caesalpinia pulcherrima is striking. You've got bright, fiery petals and long, extending stamens.
But then, once pollination occurs, the plant takes what seems like a deeply counterintuitive step. The petals just drop away entirely.
They're gone.
Yeah. The ovary at the base of the flower elongates, stretching out into a flat green pod.
Right.
And then, over the course of weeks, that green pod undergoes a massive structural change. It completely loses its coloration to become a dark, hardened, woody shell.
It's a total wardrobe change.
It's extreme. Dropping your most attractive feature seems completely counterintuitive, right? Unless this is like a drastic energy-saving measure.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a masterpiece of biological efficiency.
Okay, how so?
Well, the vibrant red petals are not designed for human aesthetic pleasure. They are a highly targeted advertisement.
Like a billboard?
Exactly. They serve as a brightly colored billboard designed specifically to attract pollinators like bees or hummingbirds.
Oh, I see. So once the pollinator has done its job, maintaining the billboard is basically a sunk cost?
Precisely. The marketing campaign was successful, so the plant immediately liquidates the marketing department to fund manufacturing.
That is ruthless.
It really is. It severs the nutrient flow to the petals, causing them to drop, and redirects every available drop of water and synthesized glucose down into the ovary.
Wow. But the flat green pod taking the flower's place isn't just a container, though.
No, it has a job to do.
While it remains green, it's actively photosynthesizing, correct? Like it's generating its own localized power supply to feed the seeds inside.
That localized photosynthesis is crucial in the early stages. The pod is essentially pulling double duty as both an incubator and a solar panel.
That's incredibly efficient.
But as the seeds mature, their biological imperative shifts from rapid growth to long-term survival.
Because they're exposed out there.
Right. The developing seeds are incredibly vulnerable to predators, fungal infections, and environmental damage. Therefore, the plant transitions the pod from a soft, photosynthesizing tissue into a fortress.
Ah, so that explains the transition into a dark, woody brown pod. The plant undergoes lignification.
Yes.
It's literally building a wooden vault around its offspring.
Lignin is a complex organic polymer that makes plant cell walls rigid and woody. By pumping lignin into the pod walls, the plant is sacrificing the pod's ability to generate energy in order to maximize its defensive capabilities.
It's trading power for armor.
Exactly. So the 8 to 12 weeks of waiting isn't just arbitrary time. It is the precise duration required to synthesize enough lignin to build a shell tough enough to survive the eventual dispersal.
Okay, so the plant has effectively built a wooden fortress to protect its investment. But a fortress is designed to keep things in.
True.
Eventually, the biological imperative requires those seeds to get OUT, which forces the gardener into an incredibly high-stakes waiting game.
The transition from protection to dispersal is where the timeline becomes highly volatile. The plant's architecture is actively working against the gardener's goal of containment.
Right, Eng's notes make it really clear that once the lignification process is complete, the gardener's role shifts. You go from patient guardian to active interceptor.
Have to step in.
Yeah. The visual cue that the vault is finished is a fully brown and dry pod. But if you leave those woody pods on the plant for even a fraction too long, they don't just, gently open. They violently split and scatter the seeds in every direction.
In botany, this explosive seed dispersal is known as explosive dehiscence.
Explosive dehiscence.
Yeah, it's a highly engineered, rapid-release mechanism.
I mean, dehiscence sounds destructive, but it's clearly a calculated evolutionary tactic.
It's the whole point of the process.
Right. But Eng has spent months waiting for these specific red seeds. If dehiscence occurs before the harvest, those seeds are launched into the surrounding soil, effectively lost in the wild.
Which is exactly what the gardener doesn't want.
You lose the entire quarter-year investment in a fraction of a second.
The plant's goal is maximum dispersal distance to reduce resource competition for the parent plant. The gardener's goal is total containment.
They are at war.
They are direct cross purposes, yeah, and operating on a rapidly shrinking timeline.
So To intercept the seeds before they launch, Ang outlines specific warning signs. The primary visual indicator is that the edges of the woody pod begin to curl right before the explosion.
That curling is the visual manifestation of mechanical tension. As the lignified pod dries out, the different cellular layers of the wood shrink at different rates.
Here's where it gets really interesting. That curling edge acts as a visual fuse.
Like a bomb.
Exactly. The uneven drying creates a spring-loaded trap. The wood is warping, actively pulling against its own internal seams until the structural integrity catastrophically fails.
You are watching a wooden spring wind itself tighter and tighter.
This raises an important question about how humans interact with nature during cultivation.
Yeah, we tend to approach gardening as a purely visual experience. Looking for the right color, the right size, identifying the dry brown pod.
Just looking at things.
Right. But Ang's journal emphasizes a multi-sensory approach. Vision alone isn't reliable enough when you are dealing with explosive dehiscence.
Which brings us to the sound test.
The sound test, yes.
Ang doesn't just watch the pod, they interact with it. The journal notes that giving the pod a subtle shake provides crucial auditory data.
You have to listen to it.
If it rattles, the seeds are fully mature and have physically disconnected from the interior pod wall.
Because for the vast majority of the 12-week cycle, those seeds have an umbilical connection to the maternal tissue of the plant.
They're tied down.
Yeah, they're firmly anchored via the funiculus, receiving constant moisture and nutrients. A green or partially mature pod will never rattle because the internal architecture is solid and highly hydrated.
So it's less like shaking a wrapped present to see what's inside and more like shaking a spray paint can.
That's a perfect analogy.
You're listening for that loose ball bearing.
Yeah.
It's the physical proof that the internal mechanism has completely detached, the moisture has evaporated, and the payload is ready to deploy.
That rattle is the auditory confirmation of biological independence. The vascular connection of the mother plant is severed.
They are ready to go.
The seeds are loose inside the chamber, and the only thing standing between them and explosive dispersal is the failing mechanical tension of the curling pod walls.
You are intercepting the plant's launch sequence at the very last possible second.
Talk about stressful.
Right. It requires a tremendous amount of restraint to wait for the rattle. But if you act too early and harvest a silent pod, you risk extracting seeds that haven't fully matured.
And then they won't be viable for future planting.
Exactly. Ang's methodology highlights a level of botanical fluency that most casual observers never achieve.
To successfully harvest Caesalpinia pulcherrima, you have to read the microexpressions of the plant.
You're practically interrogating it.
You are monitoring the exact rate of moisture loss in a piece of wood. You are calculating the tension of curling fibers.
It transforms the garden from a static painting into a dynamic, pressurized environment. You are walking through a minefield of spring-loaded wooden vaults, tapping on them to gauge their internal state.
The observation required to master that timing is immense. The gardener must be as attuned to the environment as the plant itself.
So what does this all mean? When we trace the arc of Ang's journal entry, we see a masterclass in delayed gratification and biological interception.
It begins with the deliberate rejection of the easily foraged yellow seeds.
The easy win.
Right, rejecting that in favor of a grueling, months-long commitment to cultivating the elusive red variety.
And that commitment forces the gardener to bear witness to a relentless reallocation of biological resources. We observe the bloom functioning as a temporary marketing billboard.
The ruthless efficiency of the petal drop.
Yeah, and the localized photosynthesis of the green ovary.
Which ultimately culminates in the lignification of the pod, the construction of a wooden fortress designed specifically to dry out, warp, and violently explode through asymmetric cellular shrinkage.
And through it all, the gardener must monitor the curling edges and listen for the telltale rattle of a detached seed. You're acting as a biological bomb squad to intercept the harvest.
That's exactly what it is.
So for you listening right now, the next time you encounter a simple, hardened seed pod on the ground, consider the immense, invisible labor that went into its construction.
There is a complex mechanical countdown occurring inside almost every piece of flora we walk past. It's a silent reallocation of energy driving toward dispersal.
Which leaves us with a fascinating final thought. If a single peacock flower is out there right now, quietly building mechanical tension over months to eventually detonate and scatter its seeds when no one is looking.
What else is out there?
Exactly. What other silent, high-stakes biological mechanisms are actively arming themselves in the wild, completely undetected, right under our noses every single day?